Welcome back. You're watching Network Africa. In a bid to find an African solution to the crisis in South Sudan, the African Union has promised to set up a special court to try war crime suspects in the country, which has been hit by a brutal conflict since 2013. Well, this is part of the deal President Salva Kiir and leader Riek Machar signed following intense diplomatic pressure from regional leaders. AU says that both government and rebel forces have committed atrocities. However, despite the signing of a peace deal last month, conflict has continued. Thousands have been killed in the fighting over the last 21 months and more than 2.2 million people forced from their homes. Joining us live from the University of Pretoria, South Africa, is a South Sudanese human rights and governance expert with the Center for Human Rights Faculty of Law in the university, Dr. Remember Miamingi. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you so much for having me on your program and for having South Sudan. Thank you.
You were involved in the various stages of the peace process in South Sudan. Tell me, what do you make of AU's attempt to prosecute war crimes in South Sudan?
Now, I will say that I am cautiously happy that finally the AU has agreed and authorized the setting up of an hybrid court for South Sudan to try those alleged to have committed serious crimes in South Sudan. Happy because I think finally the AU is taking leadership in the fight against impunity by people in high places in Africa. But cautiously because I think as a new convert, the AU does not yet have a record in fighting impunity that instills confidence. That is first reason why I'm cautious. The second reason why I am cautious is because now the AU, as you know, is talking of an African solution to an African problem.
Right.
Now, I do not know how that looks like because justice does not certainly have an African attire. And so I am hoping that what that entails will then play out. And finally, I am also cautious, and I've said the AU is a new convert because the AU position so far is that where the interest of justice collides with that of peace, peace must prevail.
Let me come in here,
As a result, AU has sacrificed justice for the sake of peace in many other countries.
In terms of if AU has the capacity to drive this home, AU is already saying that both the military and the rebels have committed war crimes. How effective do you expect this court to be in charging the suspects?
Now, the effectiveness of the African Union, of course, will depend on how genuine they are in terms of their willingness and their ability to deliver justice. Now, with respect to willingness, what we have seen the African Union done in South Sudan is literally covering up, Sudan, covering up those who have been alleged to commit international crime. We saw that repeated in Kenya. And as you know, the AU was the one that first commissioned the study, commission of inquiry in South Sudan. Until today, the AU has not yet released that report, a reason being that the AU think that releasing that report will compromise the interests of peace, healing, and reconciliation in South Sudan. So in terms of willingness, we are yet to see how the AU intends to do this. In terms of ability, I'm also worried. First, because AU as an organization has 98% of its programmatic budget outside the continent by partners. Unfortunately, the AU has somehow, in the course of the discussion leading to setting up a special court for South Sudan, denied a meaningful role. If the AU does not have the resource, and we know the international justice is not cheap, effectiveness will certainly depend on how the AU intend to mobilize resources. And finally, I think the issue of effectiveness will also depend on whether or not the AU member states really respect or comply with AU decision. And the records that we have are dismal. The AU does not, its member state does not take its decision quite well. So even if we say the court was established and the court gave a decision, the question is, will the AU member state be in a position to effect that decision? This, in my opinion, goes to the effect of how effective the AU will be in the process of pursuing justice in South Sudan.
You would agree with me that a lot has changed in the past few months as we see AU stepping up in brokering peace in South Sudan. Look at what has happened in Burkina Faso. It could have broken down really bad. What kind of support, if at all, does the AU need from the international community to continue in this, to continue to sustain this momentum of doing the right thing in the continent?
First, I think that the international community need to continue to show enough political will to ensure that the AU translate its words into action. That takes a lot of resource, it takes a lot of logistics, it takes a lot of support, which the AU may not at the moment have. So we expect that political support from the international community. We do also expect that the international community will put resource, and we're talking about human resource where there's a need, we're talking about financial resource where there is a need, so that the AU can also translate the words that they have said in respect to different conflicts in Africa. And finally, I think that the international community needs to, where the AU has performed well, certainly commend them. And where the AU is not doing well, certainly not keep well, there is a need for condemnation, there is a need for continuous pressure on the AU to deliver on its rhetorics.
Finally, Dr. Miamingi, fighting is still ongoing in spite of the ceasefire that was agreed to. What can be done to make both warring parties sheath their swords?
This is an indication that the peace that we have in South Sudan is a peace that was imposed on the parties. And therefore, without external, sustained, coordinated external pressure to ensure that these parties comply with the terms of the agreement, we are going to continue to see this kind of discussion. So once we, the first thing that we need to see happening is we need the AU to begin to put the stick on the table. We need the UN to begin to put the stick on the table, because there are individuals known to the AU, known to the international community, whose interests lie in the perpetuation of the war. They benefit from that war financially, they benefit from that war politically. And they're not just going to stop fighting just because some paper has been signed. So we need that pressure to come bear on those who are there. And I'm hoping and appealing to colleagues in the region, member states in Africa and beyond, that it is in the interest of everyone, it is in the interest of South Sudanese, it is in the interest of the region, that the parties to the conflict in South Sudan are made to see beyond their stomach, beyond their selfish interest, and abide by the terms of the agreement. And if they don't, that the threat of consequences, serious consequences, be translated immediately into targeted sanction, into an armed embargo on those, and into the possibility for immediate prosecution for obstruction of peace and the destruction of lives.
Dr. Remember Miamingi, there for us, is a South Sudanese human rights and governance expert with the Center for Human Rights, Faculty of Law, the University of Pretoria. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you very much for having me.
And coming up on the program, Central African Republic under curfew, nighttime, intense fighting continues between Christian and Muslim groups.